Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. Inshallah, we've all allowed time for everyone to arrive. It's great to see you all today. Alhamdulillah, we have 50 participants. So that's a really good turnout, alhamdulillah. So welcome to our first talk in our Xceed series. My name is Badr. I'm going to be hosting today's event, inshallah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So today's itinerary includes us talking and receiving talks from three esteemed speakers. So a CST talk from Dr. Idrees Ahmed, a GP talk from Dr. Usman, and an IMT talk from Dr. Sohail, inshallah. And there's going to be an opportunity for a Q&A with these speakers at the end. So any questions you guys have for the speakers, please do put them in the chat in the Q&A button, and we'll be picking at the end which questions to answer. So please don't be shy and put all the questions you want to in there. Just a quick reminder to start about Ihsaan. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وأحسنوا إن الله يحب المحسنين in Surah Al-Baqarah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do good, for Allah loves the doer of good. And Shaykh Uthaymeen rahmatullahu alayhi says, and do good, meaning doing ihsan in regards to worship of the Creator, and as well as dealing with the creation as well. And as for ihsan in sort of the worship of the Creator, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam explained this when he said that you worship Allah as if you are seeing him, and if you can't do this, then know that he is seeing you. And that's a hadith in Sahih Muslim. And as for ihsan in dealing with the creation, then you should deal with them in the way that you would love to be dealt with, dealing with righteousness and avoiding harm. And working in healthcare, we interact on a daily basis with lots of people, whether it's patients, their relatives, families, their colleagues. And this presents an opportunity for us to really strive for ihsan. And we've been given this opportunity to study these degrees and have an impact on people's lives. And it's for us to make use of this opportunity and set our sights high in doing so. And I ask Allah that our careers are a means of getting close to him, and that by his permission, we can all be a benefit to mankind, and may our work all be a means of attaining Jannah. So without further ado, let's get started with our first speaker, inshallah. Our first speaker is Dr. Idrees Ahmed. He's going to be giving us a talk about the CST program, the core surgical training program. He's an orthopedic core surgical trainee working in Swansea. He graduated in medicine from Bristol, as well as intercalating in sports and exercise science. He completed a postgraduate certificate in medical education and is currently doing an MSc in orthopedic trauma sciences at Queen Mary University. So he's held multiple leadership roles, including an ACIT, also in founding the Welsh Surgical Mentorship Scheme funded by the Royal College of Surgeons, England. So without further ado, inshallah, Dr. Idrees, if you're ready.
Jazakallah khair for that introduction. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Can someone just confirm if they can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. I'll be talking today about a surgical career pathway and the portfolio, and just giving some insight into that as to someone who's kind of gone through all the application processes. So this is just an overview of the training program that I've taken from the training website. Generally, it's just undergraduate medical training, foundation training, then either you have core surgical training or you have run-through posts. And really, the main reason I highlight this is because there's some key times during your training where you have an opportunity to make an impact on your portfolio. And for me personally, I think the most important one, if you can do something, is during your undergraduate medical training. Call this the period of opportunity. And the reason is because your sole job during this time is to be a student and study and gain knowledge. Your primary objective in medical school is to learn the basics, pass your exams and progress. Try not to do too much if you're not fulfilling your primary objective. That's what you signed up for. That's why you went through all the interview processes, and that's why you secured a place at medical school. However, if you are fulfilling your primary objective, then your secondary objective is to prepare for your career after medical school, which comes about very quickly. And using your undergraduate training as a prime opportunity to gain as much experience and portfolio points as possible. However, you need a good blueprint to do this. So you're starting off at the start of your journey as a medical student, and you want to achieve your goal of CST, for example. How do you go about doing that? So the blueprint are the person specifications. Print these off, become familiar with them, and even better if you can get hold of the scoring guidance for CST, freely available online. It gives you a good insight into exactly what you need to do and how many points things are worth. The main reason I highlight this is because this will give you the blueprint you need. It'll stop you doing things in a haphazard manner that doesn't yield anything. And it stops you from getting involved in projects that people offer you that are not in your interest or benefit to be involved in. It allows you to take opportunities that are meaningful to you. And another thing from looking at this, which we'll see later on, is that if you can find a good team of students, for example, if you have close friends or people who are trying to achieve the same thing, it is much better to work in a small team to achieve your goals much more quickly and easily than to try and do things by yourself. Gone are the days where people are, scheming, stabbing each other in the back to try and achieve their goals. That's over now. Teamwork really does make the dream work, and it eases the work pressure and load on you. So this is a screenshot taken from the scoring guide, and it's just to show what kind of things are in that scoring guide. So, for example, here, if we see the operative experience, attendance at surgical conferences, and surgical experience, some of these things are more you're able to do this as a medical student. So, for example, operative experience might be a bit difficult to carry out. You might be finding it hard to get involved in 40 cases or more, so you can leave that until your foundation training starts. But for example, attendance at surgical conferences, 3 surgical conferences, that's maximum points. You can do that throughout your medical training easily, and often the tickets are inexpensive for medical students. Surgical experience, if you know that this counts for 3 points doing your elective in a surgical specialty, then you can plan for that, or you can plan for it during your foundation training. My advice would be, if you can start a logbook, an e-logbook for any surgical experience you do get on your placements, then at least that contributes to that case number for when you're applying for CST. Another example here is people would want to get involved in audits. Again, as a medical student, you could easily be involved in data collection whilst you're on your placement, but that only counts for 2 points. However, at least starting there is a good basis. And then you can see there how exactly it outlines how to get more points, and it clearly outlines it. And this is what you should use as your blueprint. And then when you've completed these projects, you get someone to sign it off, or consultant on the who's your placement lead to sign it off, and then you have that evidence. And this is just showing the points for presenting as well. So if you get any opportunities, just do that. I just put this up, the teaching aspect, because sometimes people try to get involved in teaching, but actually the criteria to get maximum points is actually quite difficult, and you may not be able to do that as a medical student. So my advice would be to become involved in teaching that maybe undergraduate societies are involved with, and if you do that on a regular basis, you can get a letter from them saying that you've done that. And then as you gain more experience in delivering teaching, you can become involved in organizing it and gain maximum points. Presentations and publications, people talk about this a lot. However, in your own time, if you have a look at the actual criteria for presentations and publications, it's extremely difficult to score maximum points. And in some ways, I wouldn't make this the sole focus of what you're trying to do for your portfolio, because there's lots of other ways that you can get a good number of points that you can definitely secure. Whereas if you commit all your time to trying to achieve a project that you want to present but you can't, or win a prize for, then you've kind of wasted time on it. So I would just do this in the background, and if an opportunity comes about where you are able to be involved in academic paper writing, then yes, indeed, take it, but don't make it the sole focus of your portfolio. And then training qualifications is just to show that, if you do have an interest like a PG cert in medical education, then, you'll have to do this after you graduate, but just keep that in the back of your mind, and it is a useful thing to do. So then the question arises, what do you do if you don't know what you want to do, or you're uncertain about which specialty you want to eventually end up in? My advice in this situation would be, don't just sit back and not do anything. All of these portfolio things, if you choose a project that is very generic, for example, an audit that applies to patient safety, teaching that you just generally do at medical school, they're all applicable. And the main thing is collecting evidence. So once you do something, have a Google Drive folder for your certificates and just put them in there, because everything now is being done in a way where you're uploading electronically when you do put your applications in. So collect evidence as you go along, become involved. Don't just sit back and just say, I'll do things once I figure out what I want to do. What you should do is conduct projects, audits, and then you'll figure out what you want to do. So yeah, don't get lost is what I'm trying to say. Don't just wander around aimlessly. Whilst you're on your placement, speak to people, speak to trainees. My advice would be, don't speak to consultants necessarily, because they would have completed their training a long time ago. Speak to the core surgical trainees, speak to the foundation trainees, and find out what it is that they enjoy about the specialty, why they're doing it, and the challenges that they're having, just to get a good idea of what the actual training program is like. And just know that if you don't know what you want to do, you may sort of choose one thing and then change to another, and that's okay. It's always good to explore your options and finally settle on something by excluding other things, rather than just jumping to a specialty because it looks good, or it's challenging, and then not enjoying it. So the reason I say that the undergraduate medical period is a period of opportunity is because this red line on foundation training year 2 is where you apply for core surgical training. So if you think about it, if you're, out of all the things that I've just spoken about on the person specification, if you try to jam that into basically the first year of foundation training, it's impossible. So really, by the time you're starting your foundation training, you should have a good amount of portfolio behind you. Just as an example, when I applied for core surgical training, 80% of my portfolio came from the work that I did in medical school, and the rest of it was from my foundation year 1. And also there's a consideration of MRCS. My advice would be that you need to sit part A prior to starting your core surgical training, mainly to relieve the pressure on yourself during your core surgical training, that you don't need to pass 2 exams in 2 years, because it's a very difficult exam. So if you add this exam on top of things, there's lots to do. So that's why I'm saying, try to ease the pressure on yourself by doing as much as you can as a medical student. And then there's a consideration of where you'd want to work. My advice generally is, be in a place where you're going to be the happiest. So for example, if you've got family or friends there, a place that is known to you. Going for an option where you just choose a random place, it's not really the best idea, to be honest. People tend to struggle because it is a tough training program. And also you need to consider things like, can you afford housing in this place? People always talk a lot about going to London for their training, but if you've got no other links there, then I'd really question why. You can still fulfill your training and get onto higher surgical training in other places in the country and have a decent standard of living. And also you need to think about your family as well. If you're planning on having a family, or you have a family already, schools in the area, all of these kinds of things are very important. And the reason I mention it is because Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you want to excel and reach the stage of self-actualization, you see that you need to fulfill a lot of other things before that. So, you can't excel or succeed if you're worried or having other issues in your life, you need to try and set things up so that you're able to have a springboard from where you can excel. It's going to be stressful trying to do all this, but that's why you need to try and break it down and surround yourself with other people who have got similar goals, so you can ease the load a little bit and achieve the best that you can for all of you. You need to have a balance in your life. You know, you don't have to go through the system F1, F2 core surgical training. If you need to take a year out because it's just too much to do within your training years, then, you know, do that. There's more to life than just work. And also, it's very important to set your stall out early on. Why are you doing this? You know, intention is very important. And my advice to you is have the intention that you're doing this, like our brother said at the start, that you want to have a positive impact. If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, it's going to be much more difficult. You'll come across all these hurdles. It's not going to go very smoothly, and there'll be no barakah on it. And my advice is give charity. I found this very, very useful. Once you start working and you're earning your own money, give regular charity, set up a monthly direct debit for a cause that is beneficial. And even if it's a small amount or a large amount or whatever it is, give regular charity, and you'll find that actually the things that you're wanting to achieve will happen, because you're putting your wealth, you're investing it for the sake of Allah. And when you're doing that and you're working hard and you're trying to achieve the best you can for the right reasons, good things will happen. Things will happen for you. And, you know, the main thing is you have to put your best effort into it, do the best you can. And ultimately then everything else is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands about what you achieve. And just remember that they're not all your achievements. You've done it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you with the ability to do it. Thank you.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. That was an amazing talk, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Idrees. That was that was fascinating. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of questions for you. Just a reminder, guys, if you guys do have questions, please put them in the Q&A section, just in the bottom of the Zoom. You see the panel, press Q&A, write the question, and inshallah we'll revisit them at the end. Equally, at the end, you can put your hand up on the Zoom feature, and then one of our speakers will be able to answer them bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So moving swiftly on to the next talk. This is going to be about the IMT training pathways. Dr. Sohail, he's a 2019 UCL graduate who is now on IMT 1 training at Luton and Dunstable Hospital. So bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, let's begin. When you're ready, Dr. Sohail. All right.
Assalamu alaikum. Can everyone see my screen and hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Sayyidina Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Sohail. I'm going to be taking you through the IMT section of today's talk. So this IMT stands for Internal Medical Training. Just an overview of what we're going to cover. So I'll talk a little bit about the application process in terms of what you would expect, a little bit about what IMT itself involves, and then some final thoughts about why or when you should consider IMT as a potential career pathway. So just a little bit about myself. So I'm a UCL graduate. I graduated in 2019. I did a BSc in neuroscience. I did my F1 and F2 in London at Barnet and UCLH, after which I took a year out. I did a fellowship at UCLH in gastroenterology, and this year I've just started my IMT training, so I'm an IMT 1. So what is IMT? So IMT is the first part of the training pathway if you want to do a medical specialty here in the UK. So it comes after your foundation years. It's either a 2 or 3 year training program, and then after which you apply for higher specialty training. And I'll talk a little bit more about that process. So the application process, what it involves. So once you guys graduate, or even in final year, you'll become very familiar with Oriel, which is the online application system that higher education England uses for NHS careers. And this is, generally speaking, the rough pathway that the application process takes. It does change from year to year. Last few years have been quite turbulent because of COVID. But generally speaking, I think this is what you would expect. So you apply via Oriel, and they rank you by your portfolio scores. So I'll talk a little bit about your portfolio on the next slide. But based on that, they will invite candidates to interview. And then interviews take place, and your interviews will again be scored by certain criteria. And then cumulatively, your interview score and your portfolio score will contribute to your national ranking. And your ranking is released. You're told, out of 3,000 applicants, you ranked 400. And then you get to rank your choices of jobs nationally. And then once that's submitted, a couple of weeks later, offers are made. And then there's a period of offer adjustments. So if somebody above you declines their offer and decides to go down another training pathway, then you get bumped up a little bit. So even though initially people might not get an offer. So for example, for myself, I didn't get an offer initially, but with offer adjustments over the next couple of weeks to months, people do move up. And so it's not all hope is not lost if you don't get an offer straight away. So I haven't gone into detail into all the sections, and I'll tell you where you can find that information a little bit afterwards if anyone's interested. But I thought it would be just useful for you guys to be aware of the different sections of which portfolio points are awarded on. Quite similar to what Dr. Idrees mentioned in his CST talk. But so you receive points for postgraduate degrees. So if you've got a PhD or a master's, or even a postgraduate diploma in something afterwards, you can gain points for that. Awards at medical school. So if you received a distinction or a merit at any point during your medical school, then you gain points for that. Presentations. So this involves presenting posters at conferences. So the maximum points are if you deliver an oral presentation at a national or international conference. But you can gain points for presenting at local departmental meetings. So within your own hospital, if you present some work, or if you just have a poster accepted, so it's displayed as a poster rather than delivered as an actual presentation, you can get points for that. Publications. So the maximum points would be, I think it's to have more than one publication as first author of original research. So not a letter or anything like that, like an actual publication. But again, there's up to 10 points you can receive, and there's different tiers. So if you've written letters, if you're a co-author, if you've written something in a journal that's not PubMed accredited, all these things can gain you less number of points. Teaching. So if you've been involved in teaching, you can gain yourself points. The maximum is if you've designed or contributed to designing a course of teaching that lasts for over 6 months. So, for example, at my hospital when I was in FY1, we set up bedside teaching for the final year medical students. So it was like once weekly bedside teaching, and everyone was assigned a mentor, and it ran for the 6 months that the medical students were with us. So that for that, quite a little bit of work, quite easy to rack up points. Training and teaching. So there are postgraduate diplomas. Some people do masters in medical education, and you can gain points for having that on your CV as well. QI. So hopefully you guys are aware of what a quality improvement project is. But if not, then we can go over it in the Q&A section. But essentially, to gain maximum points, then you need to complete a full cycle. So design a project, complete one cycle, so complete one audit, make a change, re-audit, show that there's been some kind of change. And finally, for leadership, so this is a bit more vague, and this is kind of where you can gain points for things outside of medicine. So if you've been involved in any kind of regional or national leadership, and in projects not including just medicine. So for example, if you were part of BIMA and you were on the regional committee, or if you were part of Charity Week whilst you're at university, and you were your regional chair, then you can gain points for leadership. And then obviously your interview comes along, and so in my year, interviews were done over Zoom, kind of similar to this. And we have 2 interviewers, and they run you through a series of questions. The first half tends to be like a clinical scenario. So you're given a situation and asked how you would approach it. And then you would also be asked to hand it over to a senior member of staff. And then there's like a more general question about why are you applying for IMT? What have you done to prepare for IMT? And there's also an ethics question. So in my year, it was another scenario, but this time not so clinical, this time more just covering ethics and professionalism. And then the two interviewers grade you on a score from 1 to 5. So 5 is the level expected of an IMT trainee. 3 out of 5 would be the level expected of somebody at the end of their F2, and 1 would be the level expected of like somebody graduating medical school. So you're kind of graded on that tier, and then given an overall score. And then, like I said, your portfolio score and your interview score contribute to your ranking, and then based on that, you'll be allocated a job, inshallah. So, inshallah, you make it through that process. You go through the interview, you prep your portfolio, and you arrive at your IMT training. So what is it? So IMT is either a 2 or a 3-year training program. So this is kind of the first thing to bear in mind. You either have the option to exit after IMT 2, and these are into what we call Group 2 specialties. And you have the option to complete 3 years, and that's a requirement to apply for Group 1 specialties. So Group 1 specialties tend to be things like, I guess, what you would imagine as your classical medical specialties. So respiratory, cardiology, gastroenterology, and they're often things that their training pathway involves a general internal medicine component, or like CCT as well. Whereas Group 2 specialties tend to be a bit more niche, and these are the training pathways which you would not be expected to be a medical registrar whilst doing. So those are things like dermatology, oncology, allergy medicine, audiovestibular medicine. If anyone's very interested in the list, I can flash it up at the end. So in your 3-year training, your first 2 years, IMT 1 and IMT 2, you are essentially a medical SHO. So your job will involve day-to-day on the wards, on calls, which would generally be ward cover or take shifts. And your IMT 3 year, you are technically supposed to be a junior registrar. So you would go onto the medical registrar rota. You would be leading take shifts. You would be leading ward cover shifts, but with a little bit more oversight than somebody who's in an actual higher specialty training program would have. The only compulsory placements in IMT are at least 3 months in ITU and 3 months in care of the elderly. Otherwise, the rest of the selection is quite variable, quite flexible, and this is one of the choices you have when applying for jobs. Depending on where you apply, there's either 4-month placements or 6-month placements. So you can imagine if you're doing a 4-month placement, then you have the opportunity to cycle through more specialties. Whereas if you're doing 6-month placements, then I guess you have the opportunity to kind of really drill down and kind of hone your knowledge in a couple of key areas. So there's perks to both. And IMT is a portfolio-based, or I guess workplace assessment-based specialty. So the passing IMT means you need to tick all your portfolio requirements. So these are things similar to at med school, CBDs, KEXs, and other workplace-based assessments, procedures. And by the end of your IMT 2, you need to have completed your MRCP exams. So MRCP exams are part 1, which is a written paper, part 2, which is a written paper, and then PACES, which is a practical exam. So why did I apply to IMT? And to be honest, the main reason I applied to IMT is that you need to do it to access medical specialties higher education. So basically, if you want a career in medicine, so like the better question would be, why choose a career in medicine? So the first thing is, do you enjoy the working routine of working in hospital? Do you enjoy going in a ward round? Do you enjoy attending clinics? Do you enjoy being on call, doing ward cover, all these kinds of things? Take shifts. If you can see that as the kind of career you'd like, then being in the hospital and medicine or surgery might be for you. I think the key thing about medicine for me anyways was the diagnostic process. So seeing a patient, taking a history, taking an exam, looking at their investigations, trying to piece it together, figure out what's going on. I really enjoyed that process. And I think that's a key part of all medicine, but in particular, I think IMT, I think that's the key part of it. Procedures. So there's medical specialties have the opportunity to get involved in procedural aspects as well, particularly things like cardiology and gastroenterology. I think the opportunity to become an expert in one particular area also really appeals to me. So, specializing in one specialty and then further subspecializing, doing a PhD, doing research. I think that's something that IMT gives you the opportunity to do, and medical training gives you the opportunity to do. And I think IMT also leaves a lot of doors open. So there's still a wide variety of options and variety of careers that you can apply to beyond IMT, ranging all the way from interventional cardiology, something very practical, procedural, almost surgical, to something like neurophysiology, so more academic. So just some closing thoughts from myself and some advice. The first thing is, I think I'd advise you to always center Allah in all of your decision making. So what I mean by that is, one, always ask yourself, is the decision that I'm making, is it pleasing to Allah? And alhamdulillah, in medicine, I'm sure you guys will agree, there's most of the decisions you make, there's very few options you can choose that aren't pleasing to Allah. But always make sure, are you making istikhara? Are you making a decision for the right reason? Have you at least considered, is this going to contribute to my akhirah? Having the right intentions. So apply for something because of because you want it to be pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you want it to contribute to your akhirah. Don't necessarily apply something because you think, oh, this might be the easiest career, or this is any other kind of intention. And have a goal for your life. Think about what you want your life to be 10 years from now. Do you think family is going to be your priority? Do you not want to be in a hospital doing on-calls and night shifts and things like that? In that case, maybe applying for something else might be a better choice for you. But if that's something that you can envision balancing into your life, then go for it. And then finally, my advice to all medical students is use the free time that you have at university wisely, both to build your portfolio from an application point of view, but also just to further yourself in a broader sense. You have the opportunity and the time to get involved in so much. Don't let that go to waste. Okay. And that's all from me. Jazakallah khair for listening. I'll hand back over to my host.
All right, Barakallah Feek. That was a very good talk. Jazakallah khair. Again, we're having a lot of questions pouring in from your talk. Jazakallah khair. And I think the advice at the end is definitely something we can all take. Don't let medicine consume our lives. I feel like there's a whole sort of identity around medical students and the assumption that everyone's the same, when in reality that's not what it is. Anyway, so I'll stop waffling now. Let's go to our last speaker, inshallah, GP. So this is a GP who's just finished his GP training. It's Dr. Uthman. He graduated from Imperial College London. And Dr. Uthman, when you're ready, let's get started.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم والله في عون العبد ما كان العبد في عون أخيه. So before you panic, you can't see our presentations. Don't worry, I don't have one. My talk is going to be much more casual, which may reflect some of the contents of my talk as well about GP training. So when I was in your situation as medical students, I believe you're all medical students attending, I probably would have switched off by now, thinking, oh, the GP talk, okay, don't need to listen to that one, because I was absolutely never going to be a GP. And I was almost sometimes a bit offended when people said, oh, have you thought about GP? Because I thought, no, that's not me. But here I am, alhamdulillah. So I'm going to divide my talk into roughly into career planning and something that I'm calling a little bit life planning, because what you do when it comes to applications and how you decide about what you're going to do is partially going to be from what you're interested in and academically what you want to do. But a large part of it is going to be on what you want to do in your life and how you see your life, as previous speakers mentioned. So just to begin with, I did a little survey about there's a Facebook group of GPs, and I just threw a question in there. How many of you wanted to be GPs when you were medical students? I was surprised by the response that I got. I had almost 400 people comment, some with just simple yes, no's, and some with more details about what they wanted to do in their journey. And the conclusion from that actually is quite similar to what I mentioned about myself. 2/3 of GPs, 66% of GPs, actual current working GPs, did not want to do general practice when they were medical students, when they were in your shoes. And I think the reason why I wanted to mention that, and the reason why I was interested in that, is because lots of things will happen between now as a medical student and if you go into general practice. Many of you will do other training pathways. And then some of you will then choose that actually, maybe that's not for me for various reasons, which I can talk about in the questions if people are interested. But you will start, some of you might start obs and gynae training, you might start pediatrics. I worked with 2 GP trainees when I was an F1. Both of them reached ST7, the ST7 pediatric registrars, when they decided that they wanted to leave that training and start general practice training. So the point being, don't neglect it as an option. Don't, I think if you want to do something else, yes, make sure you do jump through all the necessary, or tick all the necessary criteria, as the previous speakers have mentioned, because if you want to give yourself a good chance, you have to put in that portfolio. But let me briefly mention GP training itself, what the application is. I can summarize it in about 30 seconds. Okay, there's no portfolio, which was great news for me, because when I finished medical school, I had absolutely 0 publications, which, leaving Imperial College, I felt like a huge failure. So if you're 4th year, 5th year, and you're panicking that I haven't done an audit, I haven't got a publication, don't worry. That's fine. That's normal for a lot of people. You're not a failure in any sense. So you apply in the normal way through the portal. You'll have to sit an exam called the MSRA, which a lot of specialties have this exam now. It's a very general medical and a bit of SJT exam. It was a lot more casual when I did it, but I think the competition ratios have gone up quite a lot. So now there are question banks and online courses and different ways to prepare for that. But that's the main hoop to jump through as far as general practice training goes. There is also a selection center, like an interview stage, which is a lot of ethical scenarios. And these 2 things together then give you your score, which will allow you to rank jobs. So GP training may consist of an A&E job, a psychiatry job, pediatrics job, and then a few general practice placements as well. And that's it. There's no portfolio. And for some people, that'll be, a good option partly for that reason. So that's that. Now, with that out of the way, I thought I'd just share my own journey, because when I was a medical student, I couldn't see past the horizon of F1. You're so focused on finals and SJT and starting as an F1. I didn't really see much beyond that. So I graduated from medical school 2016, no publications and no audits. I did do a bit of teaching, but more out of interest than for ticking boxes. F1 and F2, I found them quite heavy, to be honest with you, meeting all the criteria, doing the on-calls, and being able to do that while trying to keep up some of my projects. Somebody mentioned Charity Week. That was something I was busy with at that time, trying to keep up with some of my Islamic studies and Arabic studies, and jumping through all the portfolio hoops and doing on-calls. And, I found all of that quite heavy. I found that I needed, my attention was quite used up, absorbed by a couple of projects, couple of studies and work. So I found that quite difficult. So if you do start F1 and you're really struggling, then that's normal, to be honest with you. And what that meant is that when F2 came towards an end, I did put an application in for GP training in the October, but I did the so-called F3, where I stopped. I left training treadmill for a year. And back in that time, 2018, 2017, you're able to defer general practice training for 1 year without any justification, really, or just for no reason. Now that's changed. You can't do that. If you're offered a job, you either take the job or you leave, or you don't accept it. You can only defer for a reason. For instance, you're looking after a relative or health or something like that. They call them statutory reasons. That you can, however, I think, keep your score from the exam and the interview and defer that for a year. But these things, they change on such a frequent basis that I'd look it up in a couple of years' time when it comes to your time then. So I did this F3. It was a really good time, alhamdulillah. I did some locum work for about half of the time. Saved up some money, and then I spent about 3 months traveling and studying between a couple countries, and that was really good time for me. This is part of what I mean when I was talking about life planning. This is something that was really important to me. I've been doing my own studies at university and then F1, F2, and then I had this chance where I could, give some more time to that, and that was really important to me. And it was, that also became clear to me that my contribution back to society and to the world and in my own self-development, an important part of that is going to be some sort of Islamic studies or Arabic or something. That is something that I needed to see in my future, in my working week. I should have to have time for that. So then I went back into training at the end of my F3 year, and I did GP training as 3 years, ST1, ST2, ST3. There have been rumors for many, many years about that being increased to 4 years. I don't know if it's ever going to happen because, it's a big change. But now that there is a bit more competition for GP training, it's possible that may happen. In your second and third year of GP training, you have to factor in time for the exams. There's a written exam and then there's a practical exam, which is changing at the moment. And then after a very quick 3 years in comparison to some of the other training pathways, you're out. I just wanted to mention some of the options on the end of that, on the other side of training, because again, that may be an important part of life planning for you. So there are many, I think probably GP training has the most varied options at the end of it when you finish. So for instance, you have the salaried jobs where you work a number of sessions. One session is a morning or an afternoon, officially 4 hours and 10 minutes, but I wish. So 2 sessions would be a full day. It used to be that 8 sessions was considered full time, but I think nowadays most people would find that extremely heavy. So you very rarely find people doing 8 sessions, which used to be considered full time. What do you get paid? Important question again for life planning. It's about 10,000 a session, give or take, depending on areas. 9,500 to 10,500, something like that, per session. So if you were doing 8 sessions, potentially that's £80,000 a year. There's quite a lot of, this is something that was really important for me in terms of applications. GP training, if you get a reasonable score, you can do your training pretty much wherever you want. And it was important for me that I wanted to stay at home. I was interested in ophthalmology at the time, but one of the things that kind of skewed my judgment was that I would almost certainly have to go somewhere else because there's so few training places. But in general practice, you can stay at home wherever that may be for you. And the same with the jobs. Jobs are everywhere at the moment. You can work pretty much wherever you want, and that's been the case for a long time. Okay, that's salaried work. And just to mention as well, I got a job advert a couple of days ago for a job in Bermuda and Scottish Islands and all sorts. So you can take general practice wherever you want. Then there's a partnership, which is where you become a business owner within the practice where you're working, which the amount you make there can be up to double what you're making as a salary, but with the added pressures and stresses and risks of running the business. There's locum work, which can vary from remote work, where you can make 65, 75 pounds an hour, and then face-to-face work, where you can go from sort of 80 to 100 an hour. It's much more flexible, but the demand for that changes. During COVID, there was very little locum work available, so you have to be aware of that risk if you decide that that's going to be your way. But for some people, the flexibility is extremely beneficial. And there's also out of hours work, lots of work available there. You've got, if you do, now as I mentioned, a lot of you will do other things and then come into general practice after that. That's not wasted. General practice, you have a lot of scope for special interests. So if you do, build a portfolio for one line of work, and then you decide that actually it's not for me for whatever reason, then that's not wasted. Being a good doctor, having skills will be relevant in general practice, because you're sort of on your own, managing a lot of people, and whatever knowledge you have, you'll be able to apply that. So special interests, procedures, and so on is very common. And I think that's really what I wanted to mention. And just to conclude, really, as I mentioned about these two elements of career planning and life planning. So career planning, at this stage, I'd say as far as general practice goes, I'd say focus on learning well for your finals, studying properly, absorbing knowledge, focus on being a good doctor with Ihsaan in F1 and F2, and that's a great service you can do for people if you work well. And as I mentioned, the hadith at the beginning, that Allah is in support of the servant as long as the servant is in support of others. So that's something that's really valuable. And then the second aspect of life planning, and if you're looking towards general practice, I'd say consider what you want your self-development to look like now and in the future. Consider what you want your contributions to look like now and in the future as well. How do you want your life to look, as the brother mentioned previously, in 10 years' time? In work, what do you want your life to look like and your contributions to look like, your ihsaan to look like? And outside of work, what do you want that to look like? And general practice is very good for that. So yeah, make good intentions, think carefully about what you want that to be, use your time appropriately, and may Allah give you success, good intentions, and yeah, allow you to serve others in the way that pleases Him. Alhamdulillah.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair, and Dr. Uthman, for that. So we have a lot of questions in the chat. So if you guys had some more, please do put them in. So now's the time to answer. There are a few generic questions and some that are specifically targeted at the specific speakers. So this is a generic one. There's a lot of talk about audits, clinical improvement projects, things like that can benefit your portfolio going forward in your further training after medical school. But there's two questions actually that say, what exactly is an audit, and what does it comprise of? So I take that to the floor. Anyone, any of our speakers?
I don't mind taking this one.
Yeah, go for it, inshallah. Go for it.
So essentially, an audit is assessing whether any type of healthcare is being delivered in line with standards. So the difference between an audit and a quality improvement project is that with an audit, you'll say, for example, okay, we have an open fracture. It needs to be taken to theatre in X amount of time, and that's a guideline. Okay, let's have a look at our open fractures. When were they taken to theatre? And then you see whether they were taken in 4 hours or not. That's an audit. And then you say, okay, these are the findings. I'm going to implement a change to try and improve the practice because the compliance should be 100%, but it's only 50%, for example. Okay, we implement some sort of change and then you re-audit. And that is a closed loop audit. And then a quality improvement project might be something that it doesn't have a specified guideline from a Royal College or an institution, but it might be a local policy. And that is still valid. So what the portfolio generally tends to say is audit/QI project. And then you can present the findings of that locally, regionally, or nationally.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. And what would be the best initiative someone can take to achieve these audits? Is there an audit coordinator, or does someone have to go to, approach different consultants for this opportunity? What do you think?
So I think there's two primary ways of getting involved in an audit. Someone approaches you and says, do you want to get involved in this? You have to know what you're getting involved with that, because often it might be an audit and it's just a consultant trying to look at their post-operative complications because they have to submit that. So I would be very careful. My advice would be this: start simple. Yeah, don't try and change the world. Okay. So, for example, you're on a placement and you notice that a classic is thromboprophylaxis being prescribed. Okay, so you're there on a placement, you're there for, say, a month. You could look over 2 weeks, a sample of drug charts of how often VTE is being, or thromboprophylaxis being prescribed, and you can quickly do that. And then in that way, what you can say is you're approaching the team saying, I will do this for you. And then you'll find out, okay, you need to register the audit and things like this. But it's a very quick process. Lots of hospitals are now trying to streamline the process of registering an audit and uploading results. So there might just be one portal. So for example, in Swansea, we have this one portal where you register, upload the data, put the criteria, generate the certificate from this one place. And it's very simple, very easy. And my advice would just be find out locally what you have to do. But make sure you do that, because then you'll get your letters and certificates.
Barakallah feek. I hope that answers the question, inshallah. Very useful. Okay, so next question. I believe this one's for Dr. Uthman. Do you see your future in the NHS? And did you ever make plans to build a side hustle or leave the UK? A lot of talk about side hustles these days.
So this is going to be extremely personal for people because of what I mentioned about life planning. For me, being near my family was very important. I had enough of London after 6 years, and I wanted to come back home. I wanted to do my training at home. And to be honest with you, I have no intention to leave, but that's me personally. The NHS is going to look very different in the future, but there will always be a need for generalists. There'll always be a need to see people as a first line, acute illnesses, coughs, colds, this generalists are always going to be needed. Yes, there's a lot of scope for working abroad. As I mentioned, you get job adverts all the time. Some people go to Canada, some people go to the Middle East. USA is difficult because you have to start again for a little bit from training. Side hustles, I'll be honest with you, unless you have a real interest in business, you don't really need to. You can locum, you can do out of hours work and make a good amount. But if you're particularly business minded, then you may think of something more lucrative to do.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. And I think this is again for actually any of you guys, but is it realistic to get first author publications during med school, or is that more of an F1 thing? Perhaps Dr. Sohail, if you want
to. It's difficult, is probably how I would answer that, but I don't necessarily think it becomes any easier once you start work. For example, I think as a medical student, I think probably the best opportunity I had to get publications was in my integrated BSc year. I know that's not something that everyone takes or can take based on financial or just kind of life circumstances. So that's one thing. I think if your university has an integrated BSc course, and as part of that, you're doing a project, they're definitely pushed to get a project that has publication potential at the end of it. And then I think it's beyond that. I think if you're very serious, I think it's about approaching consultants that have like research output, and I think similar to what Dr. Idrees mentioned is just like being very aware of what you're getting yourself into. Are you signing up to do lots of work for a project at which you're going to be, fifth or sixth or whatever author, or is there an opportunity for you to do some serious work and have somebody mentor and talk you through and get first author publications? I didn't get a publication whilst I was a medical student, but I do have friends who did manage to do it, so it's definitely possible, but it's difficult and tricky as well, I'd say.
And this is a general question just from my side of things. A lot of you as medical students sort of halfway through, and they have the choice whether to do that intercalate BSc or not. Obviously, some of the London unis they force you, so Imperial and UCL. But how much value does that have going forward? So say you didn't get a publication out of your intercalated BSc or MMed-Sci, what would the value be added going further in training?
So I can answer for IMT. I think on a purely numbers basis, they've removed it from the portfolio criteria for IMT, but I believe it's still part of the point scoring for most of the higher specialty applications. So beyond IMT, if you want to apply for cardiology, gastroenterology, then you gain points for that. So that's one thing. That's purely on like a practical basis. But I think the second thing you need to ask yourself is, are you going to gain? What other skills are you going to gain from doing that BSc that are going to be useful from your career? Are you going to gain an access and to research for the first time? Are you going to learn about scientific essay writing for the first time? You gain a lot more from these degrees than just the certificate and the points. So yeah, I think that's something to consider. Yeah,
and I'm aware that they removed it even from the ranking for the foundation program as well. And that was a couple of years ago, wasn't it? So just for everyone's information, if you do an intercalated BSc now in medical school, before it counted to your EPM, so your ranking towards your F1 placements, but now it doesn't, and they've just recently taken it out of IMT training as well. But for surgical training, is that something that's still there, Dr. Idrees?
Yeah, I was going to say it's always been a case when intercalated BSc hasn't counted for much points wherever it's been included in the portfolio. So for example, even in foundation training, I think it was only 1 point. So my advice would be, don't just do it for the sake of it, right? If you're sitting there thinking, oh, it'll be good to just do an intercalated BSc, why do it? You've got to ask yourself these questions and think to yourself, what am I doing? So the main reason I did it was because our university, it wasn't compulsory, Bristol Medical School at the time. And because of that, you could intercalate elsewhere. So I decided to go elsewhere. So I was interested in sports science. I decided to go to Loughborough University, completely different place, students. And my main reason for doing it was to get experience of academic writing, which was really helpful going forward. And getting involved in actually conducting a research project, which is quite a nice talking point, actually, we're coming back into the world of medicine. So it was a very clear reason. And there's lots of good intercalated programs. So if you go on intercalation.co.uk, you can find actually 1-year standalone programs that are very interesting. Some are more niche. You can approach a university to ask them, is it acceptable for me to go elsewhere? Often they'll say no if they offer the program themselves. But if they don't offer the program, then actually they tend to be okay with doing it. And also think about when you're intercalating. So I did mine between second and third year, which at the time in Bristol was very much preclinical and clinical. So it made sense to do it between that time. Some people make a decision to do it between either third or fourth and fifth year, which I find unusual, to be honest, depending on where your finals are. I would avoid doing that unless you've got a very, very good reason. So some intercalated programs, they require you to have clinical experience, which is why you would do it between third and fourth year. But if there's no clear reason to do it, do not do it. You need to pass your exams and pass medical school to even start working. So like I said in my talk, that's your primary objective. Don't get sidetracked with anything else. Only once you're able to fulfill that, then move on. But my advice is have a clear reason.
And how easy are these? Obviously, that won't be intercalated, but sort of postgraduate sort of training. So, part-time MSCs and things. How easy accessible are those, and how much of the time do they take once you're training?
So it's very difficult once you graduate. Very difficult. So you've got to realize something. Like I said, the undergraduate period is the period of opportunity because there's nothing quite like it in your life ever. Once you start working, to take 5 years out, for example, or to take a year out is a major financial decision. You know, ultimately, people don't like to talk about money, but I'm very glad the other brothers actually mentioned salaries, because at the end of the day, you need money to live. What are you going to do for that year? How are you going to do it? You might have responsibilities, you know, personally, to your family. What are you going to do? So my advice to you is, if you're waiting postgraduates to do things, you know, the masters, for example, that I'm conducting, it's £6,700 a year, funded by myself. So you've got to ask yourself, is this worth doing? Definitely. You don't just, especially postgraduate, you don't just do anything for the sake of it, because it's going to cost you money out of your own pocket, and the time as well. So, you know, ultimately, I front loaded a lot of my training, and it's been a very intense 3 years. But that's what I wanted to do, and that was the plan that I had. But doing things postgraduate is very difficult. So if you want to do things, undergraduate is the time to do things, mainly from a time. And, you know, like I said, that is your primary purpose during those 5 to 6 years. But ultimately, having said that, if you're waiting to find something that you're interested in, then as long as you plan for that financially, you might put money aside out of your paycheck to do that, then that's great.
Perfect. And Dr. Uthman, there was an interesting question that came into the chat. I think you answered it over message. Would you be able to answer that? Just, it was about the GPs in the Middle East, and the demand for GPs in the Middle East. What's the situation there?
So yes, there is a point there. Historically, the you know, the Gulf countries, they preferred specialist consultants rather than generalists, because people often would just self-present with whatever, they'd go with their cough to a respiratory physician or something, I don't know. But that has changed now, and a lot of people, I mentioned it before, this Facebook group with GPs, is you get a lot of insight from that. There are many people who've worked in the Middle East, sometimes for a short stint or longer stints. I believe that you need a certain number of years post CCT, as a qualified GP before, as a prerequisite, but certainly as an option is there.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. And a question to everyone. So what thing are you happy that you did during med school? Something that really benefited you and you'd like to share with the group, inshallah. So if you go, Dr. Sohail, sorry to put you on the spot.
No worries. Alhamdulillah, I did a lot in uni. I look back at my time at university with very grateful. I think one thing that I did in my final year that just comes to mind. So I, on the weekend, so every Sunday, I joined an Islamic class. So it ran for the entire year, and it covered like kind of basic introduction to Arabic, some Islamic fiqh, and then some also some usul as well. I think that was, I look back and if anything, I just regret not starting that earlier, because I would have had the opportunity to carry on with some later years of the program. But that's one thing that I'm very grateful I got involved in, kind of use my time. Yeah.
Then if you others want to share your experiences as well, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Sohail.
It's a very non-professional thing, but alhamdulillah, I got married in medical school during my 4th year. So actually, what I was saying before about there's certain things that you do that increase the barakah that you have in your life. And certainly, I mean, I was very fortunate that I was able, I found a partner, got married, alhamdulillah. And all I'm saying is there's certain things that you can do that will just make things go easy. Everything became easy after that. Everything became very good. And actually, to be honest with you, I don't think, you know, I can't really say whether I would or not, but things would probably be a lot different if I hadn't made that step. And it was, we were both ready. Alhamdulillah. So, all I'm saying is there's more to life than work. So think about your personal life, think about your family life. It's very important. And sometimes your colleagues will say to you, you're mad for doing this. You're crazy for doing this. But, from an Islamic point of view, think about what will safeguard you, what will protect you, what's important as a Muslim. And if you do that, put your trust in Allah, everything works out well.
So firstly, just as Sohail mentioned, blocking out time for Islamic studies is really important. Second thing would be getting involved in sort of charitable projects or voluntary projects, not just because of what you do, but because of the people that you meet. I met some amazing people who are just role models and inspiring, and knowing them has sort of made me change what I view as what do I want to do with life. So that's the second. And the third thing, at uni, I got to spend quite a lot of time with my grandparents. I lived with them for 2 years, and that's these sorts of things if you don't make the most of it when you can, then you lose it. If you have older relatives, make time for them. Yes, you're busy, you're always good, but you're going to be busy your whole life. As a doctor, you're never not going to be busy. So alhamdulillah, that was a really blessed opportunity that I had.
So we're running out of time, so I'm just going to go 2 more questions, inshallah, and these are going to be sort of application specific ones. This is for the IMT training program. So where can more information about IMT be accessed? And also, apart from knowing that you want to specialize in medicine, do you need to know specifically what specialty you need to do before applying to IMT?
So the answer to the first question, to the second question is very simple. No, you don't need to know what specialty you want to do afterwards. And I have plenty of people in the IMT training program who are still undecided. I personally was leaning towards one, but I wouldn't say that I'm 100% decided either. And it doesn't necessarily count against you in the application process if you aren't able to kind of give an answer to that. In terms of where to find more information, imtrecruitment.org.uk. That's the place to go for all of the information about the application process, statistics on previous years, pretty much anything you'd want to find is on that website. I posted it in the Q&A chat as well in response to somebody's question, if you're looking for it.
Okay. Okay, and just really quickly, where would you upload your operative experiences as well? I think you mentioned the e-logbook, wasn't that right, Dr. Idrees?
Yeah, so sign up. So if you type in onto Google e-logbook, there's just one e-logbook, and you just sign up for an account, and that's where you put all your procedures, and it will just store them there. So definitely do that if you haven't already got one.
Okay, inshallah. So I hope you all can see my screen now. Jazakallah khair to all the speakers who come, taking the time out to answer our questions and give us really good talks. Really appreciate it. And we have more on the way, inshallah. So BIMA recruitment, just really quickly. So we're recruiting as of tomorrow, and you can come onto any team that you wanted. sBIMA maybe would be a good one. So student BIMA, this is the team that's organized this event today. And it's a really good opportunity for medical students to get to know, first of all, network Muslim medics from across the whole UK. It's not actually just medical students, dentistry, ophthalmology as well. So there's loads of divisions within the healthcare field, and you have that ACE series as well. That's a series that basically that's online masterclass that helps people prepare for the next step. So for example, this one is a stratified one, ACE FY1, and that's for hints and tips and hacks to help you ace your FY1. There you go. I read the tagline there, and that's the link if you want to register to bit.ly/ACE FY1 22, and that's for what's it called? Oh, we're going to change that, I think 23. We'll change that. That's next year. For perhaps of the final years, that would be a good one to go for. And Jazakallah khair to all the ISOCs that have helped us out and shared our posts and things. And one last one, please do sign their feedback form. So you've got the QR code over there. If you guys scan it and give us some feedback on the event, and we'll be picking up on that, and we'll be preparing that for the next events to come. There's 3 talks in the series, the Xceed program. So the next one we've got is leaving a legacy through your work, and that's set for the 20th of January 2023. So more information will be coming out with that soon. So please do keep an eye on our socials. That is british.ima on Instagram. Apart from that, جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا غيرك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.